Good afternoon. It's Senate Institutions. It's Tuesday, April 4th. We starting off a busy week, and as customary, like I like to do on the first Tuesday, just introduce the committee to the world outside, starting over here.
Yeah, Rick Mazza, Senator from Grand Isle, Colchester District.
Wendy Harrison, Senator from Wyndham.
Irene Runner, Chittenden North, plus Fairfax.
Brian Collmore, Rutland.
Where's that?
The committee assistant.
Russ Ingles, Essex. And so we have today with us Secretary, Agency of Natural Resources, Julie Moore. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming in. So we have some, we seem to have some monies that are missing out of a lot of what was proposed by the governor in our bill. And we kind of brought you in here today just to have you explain all of what we need and what we need to do and what we need to be aware of. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, my pleasure. And I am joined by Maggie Gendron, who's the Deputy Secretary of ANR, and Eric Blatt, who is part of our Water Investment Division and our State Revolving Fund expert. So we're just going to walk you through sort of the differences in the FY 24-25 capital bill between the governor's recommend and what the House has passed over. Most of the differences are relatively modest, with the exception of some of the impacts to the State Revolving Fund, and that's where I hope to spend most of our time together this afternoon, but want to at least touch on the other differences.
Yeah, so I'm kind of looking at it right here. We've got about $24 million that is being taken out of what was originally requested by the governor. So
Correct.
That's a big concern to us.
To me as well. So this first change in H 493 is about a $500,000 reduction, and this is money we had requested for dam safety and hydrology projects. As you may know, the state of Vermont owns 115 dams. The vast majority of those belong to ANR in one of our 3 departments. 105 of the total 115 are ANR owned. Most of our dams are old, designed and constructed at least 50 years ago, and we do have a number that are approaching or exceeding 100 years in age. And we know that there are significant investments needed to improve the condition, the safety, and the resiliency of these dams. We've estimated the total cost to bring our dams into compliance with the dam safety rules is more than $20 million. And there is a comprehensive inspection program underway, which will allow us to prioritize rehabilitation. Our proposal has been to seek a fixed increment of funding every year to be able to put towards those highest priority needs. Admittedly, as we've been working on this prioritization work, we haven't made investments with some of the current year fiscal dollars, which is, I think, why the House sought to reduce our FY 24-25 allocation. I would just assure you that there is plenty of need within our dam portfolio to use all of these dollars and use them wisely. There are a lot of unmet concerns related to our dams. The next change, also in Section 8, line 69 of the Capitol bill, was relative to general infrastructure projects under Fish and Wildlife. There's sort of 2 changes from the governor's recommend. One is it combined 5 line items, and I've listed them off there for your reference from the governor's recommend into a single line. That certainly gives us more flexibility in how we deploy these dollars. But it did reduce the FY 24 investment by about $500,000 from what we had sought. The FY 25 investment remains consistent with the governor's recommend, but again, has taken all 5 of those, what had been separate line items, and collapsed them into a single general infrastructure projects line.
For a new committee, Secretary, what does that do by taking 5 programs? Because we're seeing a lot of that. So taking 5 lines and collapsing into one, what does that do?
From my perspective, it gives us additional flexibility. I think from the public's perspective, it may provide a little less transparency, and they won't know how much we were proposing to invest in hatcheries as opposed to conservation camps, as opposed to fishing access areas. But certainly it allows us to move forward with projects that are ready and reorder our overall list depending on sort of broader circumstances within our infrastructure portfolio. The last of the items I'm just going to touch on before getting into the state revolving fund components was a reduction to the major maintenance line item that was in those the additional cash appropriations that were traveling with the capital bill this year. The governor had recommended $1 million, an additional $1 million this year into Fish and Wildlife major maintenance. It was really intended to augment that other category we just spoke to, and specifically the governor's direction to us had been to look for improvements to be made at conservation camps. And specifically, there was work proposed around the access road to our Buck Lake Conservation Camp. The reduction the House has proposed would take it from $1 million to $800,000. I don't think that would stop us from pursuing the project, but it would obviously affect the scope of that project moving forward. So really the big pieces I did want to talk to you about today, though, were the match for the IIJA, or bipartisan infrastructure law funds that my agency qualifies for as part of the state revolving program. These are dollars that are given to us by EPA. We need to provide a matching dollar for every 4 EPA dollars we receive. And these allow us to make low interest loans for wastewater, stormwater, and drinking water projects to Vermont municipalities. In total, under the bipartisan infrastructure law, Vermont has the opportunity to access about $320 million of federal funds between now and FY27. The first year of this is already underway with state fiscal year 23. In total, to access those $320 million, though, we need $27 million in state match. This is above ongoing state match requirements. There's a base SRF appropriation that we're continuing to receive, and then these IIJA, or bipartisan infrastructure law funds, are on top of that.
So this 27,000, sorry to interrupt you, I apologize. So this 27 million is going to release about 320 million available to you.
Correct. And just to be clear, some of those programs don't require a match that are balled up in that 320 million. Some do, but the net effect is $320 million through the state revolving fund if we are able to provide 27 million of match.
So, Madam Secretary, I had a note there that next to the $27 million figure, 24.3.
Correct. And that reflects the fact that the 27 million includes our FY23 allocation.
Okay.
So you've already provided us that initial.
So that's what
$27
remains to be
million.
funded. Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
So, yeah, go ahead,
Just
please.
put-
Yeah, I want to spend some time on this, so I want to get some questions on this.
Oh, definitely. So this is over how many years?
5 years, and we are in year 1 currently.
Okay, so my recollection is that the idea was this is what you need next year. And then, following years would be increased, but do you have a multi-year plan that you could share with us?
We do, we can give you that as a table. I don't know.
Would it be on this sheet, on this green sheet right here, maybe?
I don't think that lays out the full 5
Okay.
years of funding, but we
Okay.
can absolutely provide that to you.
Okay.
But you're correct, Senator Harrison, in that the House passed version of the capital bill provides what's required for FY24 and 25 for match, but leaves providing the match for 26 and 27 to a future legislature, versus the governor's proposed to create a reserve fund to ensure we would have the full match effective at the end of this budget year. And this.
So that leads to another question, I'm sorry. So my understanding with these funds is that they're all in one place. They don't each have their own.
Correct.
And they don't carry over necessarily, but it sounds as if if there's a reserve created, it would be just for the.
Correct. So each, under the bipartisan infrastructure law, EPA has told us what we can expect to receive each year and how much match we'll need to require, or how much match we will be required to produce. They have, all of that money's been appropriated by Congress, so it's a little bit unique in that many times we're waiting for an annual appropriation from Congress to know exactly what we're going to receive.
Right.
Under the bipartisan infrastructure law, federal Congress fully appropriated all the money. And then what will happen is we'll be drawing it down for each of the next 5 years.
And it starts 24,
23.
24, our current year.
Correct, and that's, to Senator Collmore's point, that's the difference between the 27 million in total match required and the 24.3 that's outstanding right now.
So I don't pretend to understand the real high level stuff here, but from what I can determine, the reserve fund that we want to create, there's a timing issue, I believe, that we have to have funds in that reserve fund by a certain date. And I could be wrong about that. My second point is, if we reduce it by the amount that shows up on the House approved capital bill, we're gambling in a sense that could be restored with future funds coming in, when we've already heard more than once, some pretty well-respected economists saying, we're not necessarily going to see the sort of revenue coming into the state that we've been fortunate enough to see in the last couple of years. So I think this really is important to me that it stays in the fund.
And can I expand on that same line of questioning on that? So by not having the $27 million in there available, as Senator Collmore is kind of alluding to, showing, are we at risk of losing some of this money further down the way? Whether we can find some funds later on, like the House is hoping that we can, before we even get to that point, are we at risk of losing some of that $320 million?
I don't believe we are. I believe that money is there until the date passes where we need to provide the match. There is to Senator Collmore's question about timing. Generally, we pull down our state revolving fund dollars in August of most years, so we're effectively end up being a fiscal year behind the feds because our state fiscal year starts July 1st, theirs starts October 1st,
Yep.
and we're usually operating in that sort of space between. So that's part of the reason that we seek the 2 years worth of match now. There have been questions about whether we could delay out and only take even just the what we would need for federal fiscal 24 this year, but that felt very fraught. It could leave us exposed. But I do think, to the question you were raising, Senator Ingalls, the concern is that this could place unprecedented demand on the capital bill. And I did add a figure to give a sense. So in FY23, in general, we're looking at $3.5 to $4 million of SRF match, which is that green wedge. And then the remainder of that is available for all other capital needs, including Fish and Wildlife, FPR, but obviously BGS is a big user of that. We'll be looking to increase the ask related to the SRF from the capital bill in FY26 to more than $11 million. And that's at a time where the Capital Debt Affordability Committee is also suggesting the capital pie will be shrinking. And so you can see it goes from being about a little more than 6% of the total capital bill in FY23 to more than 20% potentially of the capital bill in FY26.
Yes, that's something I didn't consider either. So I'm glad you brought that point up. That makes sense to the committee, right? I mean, if we have to go find this money later on down the way, we're gonna have 21% less that we could, effectively put out there for projects, bond for.
Correct. And so it's sort of a double whammy, if you will. By not funding it now, it also then further constrains the legislature in terms of what other capital needs that can be tended to in those out years. I don't know, Eric, if there's anything you would add there.
For the record, Eric Blatt, you had asked about a 5-year plan. We did provide a plan to House Environment and Energy. That was one of the things that they had asked for back in March to testify. The other thing I'll just note, it's a little nuance with these funds. They have been appropriated, but it's around this time of the year that we actually get the official, what's referred to as the allotment, the annual allotment, and there's always some small change. So that's why, as we progress through this, we don't know the exact dollar amount at the beginning of this cycle, but we learn about each on an annual basis what that precise amount will be. And so as a result, you're going to see little changes along the way. And one example right now is that the amount that we're getting for pollution control and drinking water has gone up slightly more than what we had estimated. So the difference now between the 9.7 that's being, that the request being reduced down to is a little under 100,000 short of the full match for just the first 2 years.
Okay.
Second and third years. So
Committee, any more on this line?
No, but you'll get us those, that 5-year plan, right?
Right.
Do you have 5-year plans for other programs?
we do for pollution control. We don't for drinking water, but we have what we refer to as an extended list for the pollution control program.
Great, so if we could get that too, please.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
And
So
so,
that's also a yellow.
correct, and I'll talk about that more
Okay.
in just a second, but just the sheets I had passed around before I began my
Okay.
testimony, these are the lists of projects that are proposed for funding based on what we know today, that under this water infrastructure money we would receive under the IIJA. So there's a set of criteria that we use to prioritize projects established in statute. Some of it depends on project readiness. So this is subject to a little bit of change, but gives you a sense of the far-reaching nature that $320 million of federal funds could have for Vermont communities statewide.
Yeah, so back to that pie chart that you showed, the 21%, just for the committees, and maybe it's a lot more clear to them than it is to me. But as you said, Secretary, it is a double whammy because as of right now, we're safe. I mean, we have that money, it's there, we can spend it. But once we make that go away, we've got to find, we're going to spend another 21% to get back what we already were there. I mean, we're going to have to spend another 21% of our capital bill on the FY 25-26 budgets to get back to ground zero before we start all over again. That's just a ton of money, where it's already safe right now. It's already there. We have the reserve. We can do it. So yeah, that's a big number.
And what's the ratio, Secretary, of $1 equals how many dollars in terms of the match? I know it varies depending on different programs. I've heard 4 to 1, I've heard as much as 10 to 1. This would appear to be on the high end of that.
It is, looking at it in its totality, it's about 12 to 1. With every state dollar, we're able to access 12 federal, but it does vary a little bit depending on whether we're talking about emerging contaminants versus traditional wastewater.
I guess the thing that is most pressing to me about it is that it goes really where we want to go as a state, or where we say we want to go as a state. It goes into, protecting clean water and making sure all of that stuff, helping towns, making sure that they're not dumping pollutants into all our 4 different geographical areas of basins. And if you look at the list that the Secretary's provided, it goes throughout the state in a big way.
Just some more questions. So these projects, are these all that are planned to happen with the IIJA money, or just in general over the 5 years?
This is a comprehensive list, I believe, Eric, correct? This includes projects that would be paid for with our base allocation as well as the expanded funding available to us.
Yeah, it says the projects will move forward with federal funding provided through match.
Right, well,
But it's not necessarily the entire universe. It's what we know about at this moment.
Yeah.
And what I will say about our projected list, the further out in time you go, the less certainty there is to the projects. So it gets thinner and thinner as you go further out.
Yeah,
so what period of time is this list?
Well, this is based on looking at the current intended use plan. And we have what we refer to as a fundable line, and projects below that are essentially the projects that are more likely to come up in the next cycle.
So each year, we put out a broad solicitation to municipalities and ask them to tell us what projects they're readying for potential funding through the state revolving fund. We then compile those and what Eric's referring to, the intended use plan. And then there are a set of criteria that are established in statute that help us to develop priorities within the intended use plan. And so whereas communities probably who are planning a water or sewer project next year are very clear about what they're planning, somebody 3 or 4 years out may not be as clear. Some of these projects may be delayed beyond that time frame, and certainly we get new projects in that we may not have been anticipating. And so as we get to the far end, the FY27 component, this list is probably far from complete, but these are the ones we're aware of currently that are planning to seek funding as of today between now and the end of FY.
Okay, so these haven't received funding yet, they're just in the queue.
Correct.
And they're for time periods, I mean, from like next year to the last 4 years?
Represents
Is this?
the year that we're currently in. And as we speak, we're actually going through the process of reviewing the latest round of priority list applications. So many of these projects that don't go forward this year, they're likely to show up as part of this next round.
Okay, so maybe I can just meet with you, just so you don't have to hear all my questions, because I'm just interested in knowing more about, because you probably have a sheet that shows the dollars and the quantities and the years.
So the intended use plan that Secretary Moore referred to, I don't know if we provided a link. We
Oh,
provide a
okay,
link
great.
to it, but we'll make sure if we did, we'll send it again. It's a link to a roughly 50-page document that has the lists of the project. It has the projects that are currently on the adopted list.
Okay.
It has a forecasted list along with it.
Perfect, that's what I'm looking for. Okay, and so will that be all the projects that are even under consideration?
Yes, everybody, it will include all the communities who submitted priority list applications to us in the last spring that are on the current adopted list. So we're right now in the process of adopting the next priority
Okay.
list. Will happen sometime in late June, early July.
And that happens annually, that updating? Okay, perfect. Yes, please, thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of weight for that. There's just take an example, I'm not singling out, but Colchester, the largest town we are, Vermont, second largest. We have no sewers. We have to tie in South Road. So they proposed just the homes along the lake, 3 miles to that project. So that takes care of the people along the lake because they got no place to go now. The sewers, you can't, And so that's what's tough about it. Now, not doing the whole town, that's just the lake for clean water.
We're gonna see some of those on the next line.
Yeah, so the other piece of this, and this is specific to the wastewater projects, or what we call municipal pollution control grants. The Vermont statute allows us to provide grants of somewhere between 10 and 35% for different types of water pollution abatement projects. And it's scaled based on the project type, some community circumstances, including affordability, the availability of funds from the legislature, as well as our project ranking. And based on a similar analysis that Eric's gone through, we know that there's already about $14 million worth of needs if the legislature upholds its traditional commitments to projects based on bond votes that have already passed. The governor's recommend had included $10 million, in part a reflection that not all of those projects will go forward in the next year, but that has been reduced to 4. And just to give you a sense, these are the projects that we are currently aware of as having passed bond votes, so indicating a high degree of readiness by these municipalities to move forward with these projects, and gives you a sense what the pollution control grant would be associated with each one of those projects based on the criteria contained in statute.
So the $110 million that shows here, Secretary, is that monies that federal dollars are gonna leverage, not counting what the towns are gonna provide as well?
That, my understanding, and I'll let Eric correct me if I'm wrong, is that's total project cost. So it includes a municipal contribution plus whatever loan they would take from the state revolving fund. And then that rightmost column, the estimated grant, is what would be essentially provided to them as loan forgiveness in the form of a pollution control grant. So you can see these represent really significant financial commitments on the parts of the communities that are undertaking these projects. The state helps provide a share of that cost, but certainly the bulk of those costs are borne by the ratepayers in those communities. But we know that municipalities also rely on these grants from the state in making decisions about how and when to move forward with these
Well,
projects.
certainly, I'm sure before Colchester or any one of these towns took a vote on it, they were expecting this grant money to leverage some funds and to maybe the project wouldn't have gone forward without knowing what was available.
Yeah, it's often a talking point when municipalities are presenting bonds to their voters, how much of it they expect to have forgiven from the state.
Well, we had Alice in here, but I didn't question it. What was their thought about taking this money out? Did they have a reasoning or? did you recall?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, you can ask her. We should come down and do something.
You know, traditionally, I think we've sought between $3 and $4 million for pollution control grants in a typical capital bill. And so my best guess would be she simply scaled it to past practice and not
I
sort of what lies ahead of us.
The one statement that I heard, and there is more to it than this, was that the board had approved 3.3, which actually, I guess, they ultimately approved the 10 billion.
Correct.
And maybe that was lost sort of in the process, but initially the board approved 3.3, and the monies that come through the capital bill for clean water funds have to also go through the board advisory capacity.
So the Clean Water Board, which Eric's referring to, starts its budget process in July of the previous year. So we didn't necessarily have benefit of all of this information, and generally have a placeholder in there for municipal pollution control grants. As he indicated, though, the board ultimately did review the governor's recommend at its last board meeting and was unanimously supportive of the recommendations contained in the governor's budget to increase funding for pollution control grants to $10 million.
So, and lastly, on this point, the comparison was made, 4 million was compared to 3.3. So that's sort of the rationale, I think, for how they settle on it. So it's more what it's.
So I just, if I could, just want to make clear, both the clean water, drinking water, and then the municipal pollution control, if the matching funds, and I just did math here on the table, 17.3 and then 6 million, so we've got $23 million that is at jeopardy, if you will, and I'm using my own words on that. But if those are not kept in that reserve fund, we run the risk of a lot of projects having to be reprioritized in the future, and also having to find other money to get them completed, which, and I don't know about any else, but if I give you $1 and you give me 12 back, I'll do that all day long. That's
Oh,
a
yeah, I
big deal.
can't imagine these being funded without this.
So did I make a correct statement about the potential at-risk projects that we're looking at here?
Correct. And many of these projects will get built at some point. They may be delayed significantly, and costs, as you know, tend to increase over time. So that's another factor here, where when we have a significant number of projects ready to go, delaying them for want of funding is also a challenging set of circumstances for all of us.
And I'm gonna go back to the 21% that's gonna add to the capital bill, the pressures that it is. I mean, it's just, you know, project costs go up. You know you're gonna spend more. And why do we just want to, that's almost like spending money all over again to me. It's just like, okay, well, we have the money now, but we're not gonna use it now. We're gonna hope that we have the monies later. But yeah, it's going now, but it's not just like stopping the project. It's just like, no, you're adding cost to spend that money now. And so you're not just putting that money aside and gonna try to raise that money. It's costing you more money to go and try to find that money later. And I mean, so it is a double win to me.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these projects would still be built at the same time, assuming what I understand that the House was doing was reducing it next year with the intent of having a similar amount the next
But we
4 years.
don't have a
Right.
guarantee of having that money. We
No,
gotta
no,
go
I
find that
understand.
money when we have it now.
But I just wanted to be clear that we're not talking about building all these projects. If there's 27 million in next year's budget, they're not gonna build 27 million
No,
projects. So the price of the facilities would be similar, because they're on their own schedule. Hopefully, the money matches the schedule. That's the key, right, is to have the money match the schedule.
Correct. We have a certain number of projects we can push through our systems
Yeah.
each year. And but the risk really becomes, I would hope we've demonstrated that there is a lot of demand out there for these funds from municipalities. And absent having that match in the out years, we're gonna have less resources, and it's just gonna stretch the timeline for
Oh,
future
yeah.
years.
No, you definitely need to have the money. I totally agree with that. And then just on that side, the economic development, housing, that all needs water and wastewater. So it's very important to get these projects done.
And if we're gonna talk the talk of wanting to be environmentalists, you gotta walk the walk a little bit. I mean, we're not talking about, okay, we're just gonna put up a new building because we need a new building. Or, okay, no, we need a new interstate exit over here. Or, no, we're talking about dirty water running into other waters and not being stewards of the environment like we claim to be. That's the part that gets me.
Yeah, I don't want, I mean, that's a whole other thing. I know Burlington has issues, right, with overflow. So with this, or I shouldn't say I know, I hear that. I don't.
There are a number of CSO projects, combined
Okay.
sewer
There's
overflow.
no doubt about that.
Yeah, okay.
That are.
I've heard people say that. I don't
Tell
know.
us
One of
now.
us too.
Yeah.
But if you look, St. Johnsbury, Burlington, Rutland, and Montpelier, maybe St. Albans, all have CSO projects that are shown on this list. So work that would be done to eliminate those overflows.
What else, Secretary? Anything else you have?
That, I believe that was the end of my, presentation there.
Committee, any more questions or thoughts or?
Oh, I will, but I mean, I don't even wanna, because stormwater is part of this. I wanna talk about stormwater utilities with you guys at some point. Maybe ultimate service areas to be defined, and some demand management strategies. I mean, there's a lot to talk about.
The house took what, 10 million?
No, that house took 24 million.
Yeah, 10 out of the cash flow, right? Yeah.
I don't know, it's not broken down
So it's not-
easily to
We'll
find
break
out.
it, we'll break it down. Right. Secretary, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I believe it was a total reduction well, I know it was a total reduction of $6 million out of the municipal pollution control
Right.
grants, coupled with, I wanna say 17 or
17.3. 17.3.
Right.
So we have 17.3 out of line 178.
Yeah.
We have 6 million out of line 180. We have 200,000 out of maintenance. We have, that's where it's at. And then we have on the other lines that you had spoke earlier, we have another $1.1 million on lines on the dam safety and on
Fish and Wildlife.
fish and wildlife, we have another 600,000. So we have 1.1, 17, 18 million, and then 6 million, so 18, 24, 25, we have better than $25 million.
Let that hours back in.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming
Yeah,
in,
thank
we
you.
appreciate it very much, thanks for the
Thanks.
in-depth explaining it to us.
Sure. And we'll
Appreciate it.
follow up with the 5-year plan.
Yep.
And a link to the intended use plan. That's
Perfect.
Thank you, very helpful.
Just one other little tiny, well, there's not gonna be any new wastewater treatment plants, right? Brand new.
Well, we have one of the ARPA initiatives is the Village Wastewater Initiative, and that is looking at new community scale wastewater systems, but they are all soil-based
Like,
systems. So
not
no
nuclear.
discharges into a receiving, direct discharges into a receiving.
Okay.
water. But those are municipal scale, small scale,
Oh,
but
no,
municipal
I
scale
understand.
community systems.
But it's just good to know that we have what we have, so then you can actually look at when things need to be upgraded.
That's gonna be the problem, where you gonna go with, who's got the land? Luckily, Colchester, the South Burlington's taking 25%, so they're gonna help us, but
Right.
Burlington can't take anymore, so they're done. So.
Well, you can increase the plant.
We can,
Yeah.
And, but then you start to bump up against some of the TMDL requirements too.
Right.
We have pollution limits.
Yeah,
Right.
But I don't know what that costs today, what would it cost?
Yeah,
It's gonna be,
A lot more than.
enormous.
it's gonna be astronomical.
When most of our wastewater facilities were built in Vermont, it was during the construction grants program, where the federal government often paid as much as, I think, 95% of the cost of those facilities. So it's hard to imagine a scenario where a community could end up with a rate structure that their residents could afford without that kind of.
We're talking
subsidy.
40,000 new units in housing in Vermont. I mean, how the plant's gonna accommodate
Yeah.
that sort of, like Burlington, how would they put more people on that plant?
Well, actually, a lot of the plants still have plenty of capacity, hydraulic capacity. The bigger issue for especially some of the smaller plants is the organic, some of the high strength wastes. And so those plants.
But doesn't Burlington have, aren't they at capacity now?
I don't
Really?
I don't believe that. First of all, there are 3 separate treatment plants.
Why do they have the overflow, because of stormwater?
Right.
Oh,
That's.
Combined.
okay, it's not the
What about
sewer.
Rutland? Is that considered a large one?
Yes, that's actually, I think that may be the single largest in the state, because the
Oh.
entire.
Whoa, aren't you proud?
Because the entire city is served by just that one plant, whereas Burlington has a plant at the north end, has one, what they refer to as the east plant by Riverside Drive, and of course the main.
Oh, okay, so the one that overflows at North Beach, that's the big plant,
North Beach, yes, that would be.
yeah, downtown.
Actually, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, because that's the one they closed. the
I'm
beach.
not sure, because that sewage from that part of town, I don't know where the hydraulic break is between the collection system serving those 2 different plants.
Where does Essex go, Senator Brett?
Essex,
Junction,
They have their own,
and they service Williston, Essex Town and themselves.
Where do they outfall, like the Winooski River?
are they got capacity yet, or are they still?
A little bit, but you know, Williston's building like gangbusters, and so is Essex
Everybody,
Junction,
Wilson's
so,
going, the housing is going up.
Yeah.
yeah, there's,
I mean,
they'll run out.
Second corners up above me, there's another 100 units going.
I can't believe it, I just drove
500 across the street, and they got over 600 apartments right there, that's all going to South Burlington.
They're
Wow.
building a new exit on the interstate too. Is it near Taft Corners, I think?
New exit?
Yeah.
public safety.
It's a diamond shaped
Oh, that's
exit
an
ramp.
exit
Oh,
sixteen.
that's-
Colchester,
Yeah, that's not.
diverging double.
But if you come down the hill on 116 before Taft Corners, what used to be all woods is completely developed now. So that stuff's gotta be going somewhere too.
Right to the Essex facility.
Yeah.
A lot of growth, so if we're talking about what, 40,000.
Wow, well, I mean, it's good, but it's bad. Isn't it?
You don't get it?
The way it always is?
Yeah.
Well, and to the point Eric made, we have a separate initiative under ARPA, where we're working with municipalities and some local businesses on what we call a pre-treatment initiative. But it's intended to address high strength waste, which usually comes out of breweries and distilleries and meat and dairy processors. And trying to sort of free up capacity to support new development by by reducing that organic load, because the plant can both pass through a certain amount of water, but it can also only pass through a certain amount of organics. And so if we can reduce the organics, it allows them to take full advantage of the amount of water they're actually able to treat. And that's been a pretty successful initiative. This is sort of our first foray into that space, but I've had a lot of interest, particularly from breweries, about how they can reduce their waste.
So we're doing that in Brattleboro
Yes,
and in Bellas Falls too, actually.
yeah, and then we were just at one in Morrisville last week as well.
Great.
So
Well, we're talking about 27 million here, and then just listening to the committee talk and, our guest talk, we're gonna need another 27 million. So we should be trying to supplement the money we've already gave away when we already know with the growth that we're talking about and the lack of capacity that we have to expand on. It just doesn't make sense to me when we have a 12-to-1 return on monies right now to risk that. Not even risk it. I mean, we got to make it work somehow, but you got to go find funds after that fact, and those funds are going to pay for what you already just gave away, when they should be paying for your future plans. That's what we should be looking at.
Newport has their own facility.
Yeah. Well, it's an outhouse, and we,
I'll figure out.
Well, we have one.
I was gonna put the budget for porta
Need more porta potties. We like those.
potties.
Yeah, you don't have to worry so much about splinters with the 40 potties.
Another piece that's probably worth putting on the table, right, about the timeliness right now is that municipalities also received ARPA funds. And the Vermont League of Cities and Towns has been advocating with many municipalities to look at sort of water and sewer needs first as a place that they could strategically invest some of their ARPA dollars, recognizing that, as you said, it's foundational to economic growth and development. And so, part of that is this is a partnership, right, where municipalities are setting aside money to help pay for these projects and expect the state to meet them in the middle. I would encourage you to maybe hear from Katie Buckley with the league, who's been leading that work with municipalities, but has been a really strong advocate for communities to first think about water and sewer needs.
Have there been
Katie
increased
Buckley?
CSOs every year?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Increase?
We are actively working to eliminate sewer overflows over time. The number of overflow events that occur in a given year is really dependent on the weather.
Right.
It's the intensity as much as anything of the rainfall events. So in a very wet year, we probably have many more CSO events. And in a dry year, there may be almost none. The term of art we use sometimes talking about is average annual, and you're looking over a multi-year period to get a sense of if it's tracking down over time. But we're also actively eliminating sewer overflow outfalls over time as separation projects occur. I actually just got a notice, I think all of us did, from the city of Montpelier that they're going to start digging up State Street next 2 weeks from now. Maybe a surprise to all of you. But that's part of a sewer separation project the city of Montpelier is pursuing, is they're going to replace the sewer and then ultimately install a separate storm sewer pipe.
We did that at Waterbury, no.
I don't know, Eric, do you know, did Waterbury have a combined sewer system?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I know they
We
tore
have
up all
about
the streets.
32 communities in Vermont, going back to the original 1920 policy. And I think we're down to under a dozen.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of communities have eliminated them, but it's work that gets picked away at over time.
I go back to, again, not spending the monies that you have available now, but I look at how hard sometimes these projects are to go, and I look at two different contrasts. I look at Colchester, who might be deemed as some of this, a lot of the rural parts of the state is kind of a wealthier area, but yet they still had a hard time to, put this, to bond for this money and to do the planning.
The problem is, you're only servicing just the people on the lake, so people had, the whole town had to vote for it, and they don't get sewer.
Right,
That was the tough one. because,
right,
Now, I'll vote for the sewer, they said, but I'm not gonna get it,
right,
because they're gonna max out just the people along the shore, but what we're trying to do is protect the lake.
right,
So
right.
all the cottages for
Right.
like 2 miles, gonna have it.
Right.
But the whole town, which is split into 3 different divisions, had to vote for that bond.
Yeah,
That's a tough one.
yeah, yeah, it's just not gonna happen if you just don't have the proper monies to sell it to everybody. You gotta be able to have that ability to sell that bond to the other people who aren't getting the service. And I look at Brighton, who's struggling. I mean, very, very rural, 1,100 people up there, but beautiful lakes and trying to figure out how they're gonna do it. I mean, this money is just important to them. It really is.
It's not gonna go away either, it's gonna be there.
Oh, and we're just talking about the growth. and what we want,
We're encouraging it, so,
Yeah.
you got a tough job.
But you do it well.
You're doing well, yes, you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you have other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for your time this
Well, who
afternoon.
else can give us, while you're just here for just the last little bit, I mean, you've already given Linda, one name, who else should we get in here and talk with?
I would encourage you to hear from the American Society of Civil Engineers, who recently gave Vermont a C for our overall infrastructure grade. Jessica Luisos is the president, and Linda, I'm happy to follow up and provide her contact information. Green Mountain Water Environment Association is the trade organization for most of the water and sewer operators in the state. Bob Fisher, who is in South Burlington, is also now the president of the New England Water Environment Association, but I think could also offer strong perspective about infrastructure needs in the state. I don't know if there's anyone on the drinking
Joe
water.
Duncan for Champlain Water District.
Would be another good
If you guys
person.
can send those to us, we appreciate it, we'll get them in.
Yeah, be happy to send you
And,
contact
The
information.
committee, as far as I know, Senator Mazza came to me this morning, Colchester's already come to him, they're starting to hear about it. If you guys have anybody, with some projects on board or bonds that you guys know that you took in some of your towns and all that, let's get some of those people in, let's talk to them.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's where I live.
Yeah, that they have their own system.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're gonna
Yeah,
stay
yeah,
on
that's
a little
lot of
bit. It's just,
capacity. Yeah.
we'll have a talk amongst ourselves. and-
I gotta jump across.
Yep, no problem,
10 minutes.
no problem.
It's a big issue statewide. I mean, we all want clean water, we all, but boy, it's a big issue, because everybody getting close to maxing out.
I don't want
I
to
don't
put
think
any of
they're
this stuff
getting
across.
What's
No.
that?
I don't think they are getting close. I mean, we need to use it responsibly. But,
How would you like Burlington, they're maxed out. I mean,
no, they're not maxed out, is what you said.
they're not.
Because
The
what you can
stormwater?
do is you build more segments of the plant. And you can also reduce, like when you have less stormwater going into it, because really it's only the sanitary sewer that has to go into the plant. Right, so you do less that
I
way.
haven't heard Burlington come up with a turn. I mean, every year they have the overflow.
I know, I think that's because of the stormwater mostly.
It
Because
is,
of the
but,
combined
It's pretty hard to
stormwater.
explain to the public, but they have to close the beach for a week.
Oh, it's
Right.
awful.
Yeah,
No,
I mean-
and the pollution from the beach.
right, I mean, you say it's only the
They just think
stormwater,
it's-
Yeah.
which you're not making it light, but it still pollutes and puts contaminants in the water dangerous enough to where they don't want to swim in it.
No, but stormwater you treat differently. That's why, like, stormwater utilities are really, really good.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I wanna ask them about, but I didn't wanna get everybody for
And whatever you find out, I mean, I know
Yeah.
you got some questions and all that, please report back to us and
Yeah,
let us know. And if during those discussions that you find some other people that we should talk to, let's get
Oh,
them.
yeah.
Let's
When
get
I
them.
was with Bellows Falls, we expanded, or they, I don't remember what part, we were expanding the wastewater treatment plant. And then we had issues, things that we had to do on the water treatment plant too. But this source of funding is wonderful and towns wouldn't go ahead without
Right,
this source of funding.
yeah.
It's fundamental.
Right.
And the way that the state does it with it's a little confusing because they give you a negative interest, although I don't know if you would, I'm looking at you because I thought you might know, but they used to do something called negative interest, which means that you get money back, which is very hard to explain to folks, but it minimizes the impact on the rates.
Right.
Because people, especially in low income communities, they can't afford to pay a
But we
lot.
wouldn't be in this situation if the House had taken money out of the cash fund and put it.
Assuming they don't put it back,
Yeah.
assuming they don't, that's
Well, they're not
honestly,
gonna
I
put it-
don't know why.
no,
we
that's-
don't-
that's the
I don't know
thing,
why we
Senator
don't do a
Harrison.
5-year plan.
They're not
I
gonna,
don't-
they're not going to put it back.
They've got instructions to take it out, and that's.
Well, it has to go back.
Well,
I mean, not, it doesn't
I
have to
wish
go
you
back
could say
in
that.
this year, it has to go back in the year that it's.
As long as you have the capacity. So here's what I really want the newer members to understand. And I'm a newer member as well, but I've listened and I've been here, I've been here long enough to where the budgets have never been as easy as what they are right now. I mean, it's been impossible to get it to be balanced the way that it is before we spent $10 billion. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to have that money. It's just not. And then what happens? Okay, we're just going to make it happen. We're going to make that money happen. Well, then you're not funding your pensions again. And then we get it. Then next thing you know, we're another $1 billion in debt there. And then you're not. And then all of a sudden, the people that the debt affordability people say, well, no, you're not going to bond for 120 million. You're going to bond for 60 million. So then we're not even meeting our simple obligations as far as the maintenance on our buildings. We're not doing any new projects. We're just hanging on for dear life, man, and just hoping that we can make it through until the next big boom. Whoever knows what that is.
The federal government this morning is 31 trillion in the hole.
Yeah.
31 trillion. So the days of sending money out are gone. 31 trillion.
So they're gonna have to just print it, you're saying?
Wow.
That's what we've done the last 3 times.
That's right.
It's serious, 31 trillion.
So Becky and Dan, do you guys have something for us, or were you here for support?
Sure.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we weren't taking your time when if you guys had something that you were bringing to us.
Yeah, I had to leave when we were going through the text change, the bill itself. Was there anything interesting on that?
I think we're getting a pretty good handle of it. I think a lot of what we talked about is getting these people in, where our money was going and stuff like that. And I don't think a lot of what Dan and Becky went through the other day, I don't think that's where our concern is. I think our concern is what we're starting to attack right now, and starting to find that money. So Senator Harrison, I don't think you missed, it's not that what Becky and Dan did tell us was important.
It's on the video, maybe I should
Right.
watch the video.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I know.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Just fall.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the things that I've said from day one, that the first thing that I've said in this committee is that we just need to really, really understand what we're talking about because, first of all, it's a very complex budget this year. But again, we're going to have to go, we're going to have to probably some of us are going to have to sit in appropriations and ask them, hey, listen, we got to claw some of this stuff back. I mean, we've got to have a 12-to-1 return on our monies. This is what we got to do. So, yeah, so it's important that we understand it.
Across the hall, transportation, they sent me a bill with the fee increase in the transportation bill. That doesn't usually happen.
Right.
Fees usually separate. Then you vote up or down whether you want to increase your fees.
Yeah.
So, on the face of the bill over there, that transportation outside of its the realm of what we're talking about, we got the transportation budget, we got the perfect thing in there. Then they take $21 million of increase in the fees, which some people don't want. That's up to them, but it should be a separate bill. That's not the way I got it.
Well, it should be some good bill for clean politics because what are you going to vote against your own bill?
Yeah, you can't vote against your own bill.
You're not voting against your own bill. It's just not going to happen. But let's find out really how people feel about it and, and split it out, not to get off the subject of, what we're talking about here, but,
The House has been different this year.
yeah, it does fall back into being able to explain why you're fighting and clawing and trying to get back what was originally in the bill.
Oh, well.
What else, committee? What else, while we have some time, we're still online and,
So did Alice go over this? They should in there, or probably didn't pay attention to this section, did she?
I think
She did.
I think in my take of it, and please don't let me be the voice of this all by itself, and somebody else can add on. I think that Alice was kind of holding the party line, but that's really all we needed for now. That's really all we needed for now, and not a big deal, nothing to see here. Let's not worry about it, it'll be fine, we'll find the money and on we go, but, I don't know, in my opinion on that, it's 12-1, it's free money, you know, you gotta. Yeah, and I'm not talking about Alice.
No, I agree with Senator Mazza and you also, Mr. Chair. I'd love to know where it went and I know it went to the general fund, it must have. And what that funds as opposed to what I think all five of us realize are pretty once in a lifetime opportunities to take advantage of some real structural improvements that we can make. You know, if it went to paid family leave or it went to childcare, well, that's a policy decision.
Tell me that money that you took gave us a 12-1 return someplace else.
There you go. Yeah, we're leveraging.
I can't see saying that you're not going to get that money in future years. That would
You haven't
not
been
make
here long
sense
enough,
to
Senator
me.
Harrison. You
but
just
how
haven't. You haven't been here long enough.
Well, I know, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
You haven't been here
because we
long
don't,
enough. You haven't been here long enough to try to find out where you're going to pull those millions from to leverage that money. Because the money's just not there. In normal years, the money just isn't there.
Yeah, we need to see what they are funding, right? We need to
I
see
wish I
their
could
whole
predict
budget.
future years, but you get through 2-year cycle, and that's about all you can do. Because talk about future, oh no, you don't talk
Well-
about future, not in this business.
Towns
wish you
do 5-year plans.
Town's a little different legislature. You got 180 people here that decide. It's-
Oh, yeah.
It's a different
Well-
ballgame. I never look to the future. I've been on transportation my whole life here. And to predict, because if you can get through 1 year at a time, in this business, it's great because it's nice to say in 3 years we'll have, but whoever thought we were gonna have the money we got from the federal government 2 years ago?
Right.
All of a sudden, we wake up one morning, we got $2 billion over here, $5 billion here.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I think in towns, you know, you have more local control, people feel more invested, so they're more apt to vote yes on that $1 million or $5 million. So,
I know one way we could do it, increase taxes and fees, that's
there
how.
you go, there you go.
And that's a for sure thing. And to me, you've got an absolutely great opportunity right here not to have any of that.
So where would that money go, the 20 million?
I just
2.7
suggested
million?
2 places, I don't know that's where it went. At this point,
No, no.
it's kind of like this, I don't know where to grab it, I have no idea where it went.
Nobody. Appropriations committee did it.
Yep, go ahead, Dan.
Dan Dickerson, Joint Fiscal. I don't know that you'll be able to get, a dollar for dollar accounting of, we pulled 30 million from the capital bill and we spent it here. But I can send you on our website, there's a list of all the one-time appropriations that were in the House version of the budget. So you can at least see in those capital projects that were, I guess the one-time general fund plus the
That would be
capital
helpful.
reserve fund are part of that construct. So you look through that, list of, there's workforce spending, there's environmental spending, there's a lot of one-time appropriations in there. So you can see the comprehensive list, but you just won't be able to see, we pulled 30 million.
Yeah, it
from
won't
here
have
to
little
say-
arrows. Yeah, but that would be helpful.
That'd be very helpful.
I'll send it to Linda.
Yeah, that'd be very
And
helpful.
then if we have Alex, you can tell us.
Yeah, usually we don't do bonds of money, have a ceiling of 80 million, 70 million. This cash extra this year, that's what they can't take money from this committee on their bonded money. That, this year, because of that extra cash, they took it. That's easy. Because usually we live within a budget, like the Debt Affordability Committee said you could spend 74.2 million this year. That's what you live with. You can't go over it, you go under it, but so you max out. But when you had this cash, what a place to go get cash. Ooh, here we go.
Yeah, go Rob, go.
So all you do is get the speaker or the chair of both committees, they get together and they say, okay, I guess we can take it. And it's gone.
Yeah, because there used to be a lot, it was a lot simpler. I mean, again, I don't mean to be the old little veteran here, but certainly when you have that money, all it is plug and play. All you got, it was so easy before. If you took it from here, you had to replace it there. I mean, you moved that monies around. You didn't spend any more, you didn't spend any less for sure. but you just plugged and play. If you took it one place, you had to put it someplace else.
I was here during, we had no debt affordability committee, and there was no ceiling.
Oh,
And I remember years we spent $110, $112 million, because then it was work, you know, you want a project up here, you got it. But then that affordability committee said, okay, this is what you can spend, 70 million, 60 million, and you don't go over it. That was easy, I thought, because this is your ceiling, this is what you can spend.
no, it's responsible.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, because they told us what we keep our bond ratings, what we had to spend.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're gonna go, you know, that's why the pensions got in a hell of a mess over the years, because it didn't fully fund the pensions, and now look where you are. We got $3 billion or $4 billion that you owe pensions.
We're gonna have 750.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's scary when you don't have any limits. That's why it's so nice when you have a limit, okay? It's like, person getting a paycheck, they get $500 a week, that's their limit, and they spend it. But, of course, credit cards, they got those, they do that. That ruins America too, so. Credit cards in the country was high as they were.
So we made strides during COVID, reducing that.
Well, I think we talked this through. Anybody else? Dan, Becky, anything to add? And this gentleman over here, I'm sorry.
Nick Kramer, Department of Finance and Management, just be in the highest years of the administration.
Thank you, Nick.
Any money you want to borrow with or anything?
What's that?
Any extra money you got to borrow with?
We have the opposite problem right now.
Anything you guys like to add into while we're here? Anything? All good? Okay.
Wait, I think, did you raise your hand?
So my,
Yeah, please, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, just reflecting on the last comments about the dynamic between the Appropriations Committee. I think this committee will recall, I was in here with Deputy Commissioner Pardee Merrill talking about the cash fund. I think those were exactly some of the concerns we had, right? That if the cash is available, it's sort of in a given appropriation cycle, ready to be taken. So just re-underscoring the administration's.
But, you know, it's just talking about that, and I mean, it's my biggest concern too. You guys heard me from day one. Hey, listen, it's gonna be different this year. You know, that's how much we gotta end up. I mean, how many times I say, hey, what we work on today, we might not be working on tomorrow. And I think that if this trend keeps on going, a great idea such as this cash fund could possibly go away. It really, really could, because we can't be trusted with that cash without spending it wisely. I mean, I could see that a great idea could disappear because we can't be trusted.
And I don't think you're gonna get it back from Jane across the hall, because she's looking for every nickel she can find too, so.
Well,
It's,
so we gotta try.
I know, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I agree,
And
Senator.
once you get it, they spend it.
I agree, Senator. I agree with that very, very much. I really, really do.
Cause a lot of problems,
Yeah,
Gee.
Yeah, I was just, so we do have reserve funds that have very
no, we're,
particular reasons that you can get money out of them, right? So it, you know, I would have thought we would think about the cash fund being a reserve fund. And now we are thinking about that. So do you have anything, like, are they looking at restrictions on the use of the funds?
well, we did, good question, and you said something about that before. Let's get, before we get too far down in this, let's get the people in here that would tell us in detail about the reserve, the cash fund, what it can be used for, how it can be used for, and what it can be. That is a very, very helpful, useful discussion. And we had the benefit of that last year because we set it up. I mean,
Okay.
Joe Benning and I set it up, Senator Mazza set it up. We went over and talked to Senator Kitchell about that. So if we could, maybe we could do that. If you have time tomorrow, I've heard the speech before. Or whatever, at any time, or Friday, or whatever. I'd like to have, who would be best to tell us about that?
Do you want me to come in to walk through the big build language that changes the enabling language of the fund?
Yes,
Okay.
that'd be good. To talk, and Becky, when you did that, you tell about the restrictions of how it can be used and all of that. Yep, that'd be great.
Great, is that last year's big bill? Or this
No,
year's?
there was changes in the, I mean, it was enacted in last year's big bill, but then there are proposed changes. So I can go over what is currently in the
Okay.
statute, and then the big bill that came over from the House, that's currently in the Senate, there are proposed changes to that language.
And intent, Becky, as far as really what it was for, give them the history of why did we do this? Why, how does it work? If in theory that we can keep that going, how does it work? I think that would be a,
Maybe finance and management can speak to more of the
Yeah.
long-term intent for that.
I think that would be very, very helpful.
Great. And you'll be gallivanting with
If I see your picture on TV.
Oh, you're gonna,
Right now.
they've already asked me.
Yeah.
They already told me to dress nice. And comb my hair, brush my teeth, wash behind my ears.
Yeah, I think this would be the best, Kristen Hauser would be the best person to contact. Yeah, and I don't know if she would
Yeah.
recommend.
Good on.
us to speak about it.
Linda, we'll go on, please.